morning, church in the house, and good morning, church online. So as Sheldon said this morning, we're continuing to drill down into the topic of worship as part of our Life with God message series. And I've named this morning's message Holistic Worship, which is not really a great title. Holistic is a word that carries some negative connotations in various contexts. But I use the word holistic to capture the idea that worship, the kind of worship that we see prescribed in the Word of God, is worship that involves the whole of who we are, hence the word holistic. And Jesus told us as much when he said that the first and foremost, the most important command is for us to love the Lord your God with all your heart, which is what? Emotions. There is coffee if you need to wake up. Heart would be emotions, and with all your soul, soul is a kind of a complex biblical concept, but it does have to do with our will. Our soul is the seat of our personality and our decisions. So love the Lord your God with all your emotions and with all of your will and with all of your mind, with all of your intellect and with all of your strength, which is your physical being, right? With all of your bodies. And so Jesus himself told us that loving the Lord, or worshiping the Lord, if you will, by Jesus' own definition is holistic. It involves the whole of who we are, not just our minds, not just words that we articulate, but also our emotions, our souls, our will, and our bodies. And this morning, so what we want to do is unpack some more implications then about what the scriptures have to say about holistic worship, what it is that the Lord requires of us. And I want to drill down in Psalm 34:8, which I mentioned in passing last week. And so if we go to the next slide, let's read this verse out loud together. Taste and see that the Lord is good. Oh, the joys of those who take refuge in him. And so there's several key truths about worship, the kind of worship that the Lord requires of us that are embedded in these words. And so the first point I want to make this morning is that worship is a choice. We see it in the words, taste and see that the Lord is good. See, tasting is an intentional activity, right? Right? You can't just passively see that something tastes good. For instance, you just can't passively see that French fries are good, right? You have to make this intentional decision that's followed by an intentional action. I have decided that I will taste a French fry. And then, so now I am reaching out to grab a hold of a French fry, and now I am putting the French fry in my mouth, and I am now tasting the wonderful deliciousness of French fries, right? So tasting, you see, is an intentional activity. And so here in his word, the Lord is telling us that worship is just like tasting. It's an intentional decision of our wills, of our souls, followed by an intentional action. I have decided, I've made a decision that I will taste and see that the Lord is good, and so now I am reaching out to grab hold of the Lord, and I am now choosing to engage all of who the Lord is with all of who I am. And so, practically, just teasing this out a little bit, this means that when we gather to worship, as we have done now, when we set aside moments to worship, as we will do in a moment, that we have to make an intentional, conscious choice that I am going to engage in worship. Worship is not a passive activity that just happens for you in spite of you. You must intentionally choose to engage in worship. And now, I don't know about you, I'm guessing you're similar in this experience, but you've probably noticed that in any given worship opportunity that you step into, there are a million various distractions that get in the way of making the choice to engage in worship. So, for instance, just jot a couple down. I am dead tired this morning, and I don't feel like worshiping, right? I am stressed out and exasperated from trying to get my kids ready to go this morning, and I don't feel like worshiping. My wife and I got in a huge fight in the car on the way to church this morning, and I don't feel like worshiping. Anyone want to fess up to one of those? Yeah, okay. It's the gig. That's just what Christians do on the way to church. They fight. All right? My mind is racing a million miles an hour about a million things that I need to get done this week, and I just don't feel like worshiping. The worship team isn't playing my favorite worship song, so I don't feel like worshiping. And somebody ate my favorite donut. I don't feel like worshiping, etc., 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 right? And we just don't feel like worshiping. Those are the kinds of things that often get in the way of us making this intentional decision. I will taste. I'm going to do it. I'm going to make a decision to taste and see that the Lord is good. So listen to what I'm about to say. So often we will choose not to engage in worship because we just don't feel like it. And that, in and of itself, is exactly the definition of emotionalism. See, a lot of people react to worship that is emotional because, that's just emotionalism. But when we let our feelings dictate our choices, our actions, that is emotionalism, pure and simple. When a Christian says, I'm not going to worship God, this mic keeps jumping in and out, I'm not going to worship God because I don't feel like it, that is emotionalism at the worst. That is emotionalism at the worst. Because worship is not a feeling, worship is a choice. Worship is the choice that I will taste and see that the Lord is good, and the Lord is good whether I feel like it or not. Worship is a choice we make because of who God is, regardless of how I feel. Maybe, let me switch to the handheld. All right, we're going to hit the pause button, everybody. I bet we have a dead battery. Huh? Well, that's a fresh battery. All right, we'll keep running with it. If it keeps dropping out, I'll just switch to the handheld. All right, emotionalism. All right, worship is a choice we make because God is good, whether we feel it or not. And so when we have a worship opportunity, as we do each week when we gather together, and as we will in just a moment, worship begins with you making a choice. I will worship. I will worship the Lord. I will taste and see that the Lord is good. All right, so that's our first point. Worship is a choice. Okay, now I want you to listen carefully to the second truth we glean from this passage, because it's going to seem like I'm contradicting what I just said, but it's not. Psalm 34:8 also tells us that worship is experiencing God. It is a choice, but it is also a response of sorts. It is an experience. All right? Implicit in the language of this verse is God's clear desire for us to experience Him in worship. So look again at Psalm 34:8. Taste and see that the Lord is good. All right, so tasting is a choice, as we've just seen, but tasting is also an experience, right? All right, I need to hear more. Tasting is an experience, right? Tasting is a physical experience. You know, if I were to say, I'll pick on Jason, hey, how do those French fries taste? Are they any good? And if Jason would say, well, I don't know. I simply made an intellectual decision to put them in my mouth, but I didn't actually taste them. I'd say, What is wrong with you, dude? Right? And he would say, well, just tasting, having the experience of tasting French fries, that's just emotionalism. Again, I ask, what is wrong with you? I just simply want to believe with my brain that French fries are delicious. That's just wrong. It's like, in my experience of coronavirus, some of you, because I had it back in October, lost sense of smell, sense of taste. It was horrible eating food. It's just like, there's no reason to live. Food doesn't taste. That's an exaggeration. But it's like Christians have come to believe that spiritual coronavirus is the way worship should be. We can't taste God, we can't smell God, and we shouldn't even want to taste and smell Him. Worship that is just strictly intellectually nutritious, right? But insipidly devoid of any actual experiential flavor whatsoever that is satisfying enough for me. It's like spiritual coronavirus. I don't even want to taste anything. So I was profoundly dissatisfied with the experience of not being able to taste food when I was down with coronavirus. I suspect that God is profoundly dissatisfied when in our very narrowly defined, our narrow definition of worship of Him, we find Him to be insipidly devoid of any actual experiential flavor whatsoever. God doesn't want to seem like oatmeal with no flavor, which is redundant, actually. Okay, you see what I did there? Right? And in fact, that is exactly contrary to the Word of God. God says, taste and see that I am good. So the Lord doesn't want us to merely make this intellectual decision to acknowledge His goodness. He wants us to experience it, to taste it. So worship is an experience. And so the word taste and experience. And next, see that the Lord is good. Seeing is an experience, right? Yes, okay. All right, Jason's turn. Seeing is a physical experience. Next line, the joys of those who take refuge in Him, those who actually come under the place of the Lord's presence have joy. Joy is an experience, right? Yeah, joy is an emotional experience. And so in this verse, the Lord actually commands us to experience Him, to taste His goodness, to see His goodness, to experience the joy of being in His presence. And so worship is experiencing God. And experiencing God involves our hearts, our emotions, things like joy. It involves our souls, our decision making. It involves our minds intellectually and the words that we articulate and our strength, our bodies. Worship is holistic. And worship is experiencing the goodness of God, experiencing Him with all of who we are, heart, soul, mind, and strength. All right, so far so good? All right, so I'm gonna actually just have one more point. I was going to say simple point. It's not a simple point. So you need to wake up and put your thinking caps on. This is the point. Holistic enjoyment, meaning enjoyment that involves all of who we are, is just a natural human response to goodness. Now, I think that's sort of a complicated sentence, and so I'm going to say it a little bit differently. So as human beings, just simply enjoying something with our minds and enjoying something with our hearts and emotions and enjoying something with our wills and our choices and enjoying something with our bodies. So in other words, enjoying something holistically is not weird. Right? It's not weird. Right? Enjoying something with our hearts. Is anything weird about that? All right. So holistic enjoyment is something that is just simply a natural human response to goodness when we experience it of any kind. So why am I making this patently obvious observation. It's this reason. For many of us, when we see worship happening, when we see enjoyment of God happening that involves somebody's emotions, for some of us, we think, oh, that's weird. They're getting emotional in worship. I'm not comfortable with that. Right? Or when we see worship involving a person's body. That's weird. Did you see what he's doing? That's just weird. I am so uncomfortable with that. Right? But listen to this. It's not weird. It's natural. In fact, there is nothing more natural than for humanity to express its joyful experience of goodness than with our minds and with our emotions and with our choices and even with our bodies. So back to the sentence, holistic enjoyment that involves the whole of who we are, is just simply natural humanity to good things. All right, let me give you some examples just to drive this home. Those of you who are alumni of Beta will recognize some of these examples. So have you ever eaten a meal that was just so absolutely delicious that you're like taking it's just like, that is so good. Oh, that is so, right? You've had that, right? So, or have you ever seen a sunrise or a flower or a star-filled night sky or a beautiful mountain range or sunset over an ocean, and it was just so beautiful and so awe-inspiring that you just couldn't help react to this good that you were experiencing with words, like, and even in articulate words. Oh, that is amazing. It brings a tear, right? You've had that sort of experience. All right. There's nothing weird about those responses, is there? No. We naturally respond with emotive words, with emotions, with bodily postures. We naturally, as human beings, respond to that which is deliciously good, or that which is beautifully good, or to that which is breathtakingly good. That's not weird. That's just humanity in action, right? You can probably think of a time when somebody just did a good deed, and it just moved you. It moved your heart. It moved your words. It actually might have moved your bodies. A few years ago, I ran into this story about a teenage boy who, years earlier, as a fourth grader, had promised one of his classmates that he would take her to their senior prom. This classmate, this fourth grade classmate, was a Down syndrome girl. And so years later, though she had actually moved to a different community, a different school system, and though he had grown up to be kind of the all-star jock, homecoming king kind of kid in his school, when it came to it, he invited his fourth grade friend to his senior prom. Did you just hear what happened? There were noises that you guys just made. That was weird. That was just weird. And some of you even you moved your head. That's just, right? There's nothing weird about us emotionally responding to good deeds, to us physically responding. We naturally respond to that which is good and kind and compassionate and merciful in the world. And as a third example, you might just think of times when you just saw that a wrong had been made right, that good triumphed over evil, when you saw that justice was served and the bad guy got their comeuppance, right? And you're just like, yes! Oh, in your face! Right? There's anything weird about that? that when we experience justice, we like feel it in our bodies intensely, and we feel it in our emotions, and we just have to say stuff about it with our minds in your face. Right? That's not weird. That's just humanity in motion. That's just simply what we do. And so the point of these examples is simply this. There is something about the way, and we know this from our human experience. There is something about the way that we're naturally hardwired as human beings that enjoys that which is beautiful and good and delicious and right and just and merciful and compassionate, right? There's something that we enjoy that, and we naturally respond to that kind of goodness in ways that are intellectual. We respond with words, we respond with our emotions, and we even respond with our bodies. And there's absolutely nothing weird about human beings doing that. In fact, we expect it. It's weird when people don't do, what our catalog of human responses would predict they're going to do. Right? And so in the exact same way then, worship, which is enjoying God, and God is ultimately good and ultimately beautiful and ultimately just and ultimately merciful and ultimately compassionate, etc., etc., etc. And so when we experience the goodness of God, the ultimate goodness of God, human nature would just simply expect that we're going to do like we did with the one story. Or we would cry, or we would celebrate, or we would shout, or we would do a yes. Right? That is not weird, it's just simply human to enjoy goodness, and what is more good than God? And so, since we know that human joy, I'm going to skip this paragraph because I went off script and I'm just saying everything here. Worship team, come on forward. All right, you get what I'm saying. Emotional worship, physical worship, intellectual worship, choice worship is not weird. Here's another example for you to think about. And what I want to... let me just tell the story, and I'll tell you what the story means. So imagine a man who just, he's given his wife this beautiful bouquet of flowers to celebrate their anniversary. And she's like, what? So she's got the physical, emotional response. And so she steps in. She's like, I'm feeling a hug coming on here. She's feeling romantic and whatever. But he responds coldly and stiffly, stop. I'm just doing my duty. All right? A simple thank you as a matter of intellectual fact, right, would be sufficient. Right? And again, we would say, what is wrong with you, dude? Eat the French fry. Step in for the hug, right? It's just wrong. We know that sort of that emotion-less response, that physical-less response, that decision-less response is wrong because that's not what human beings do. The guy's behavior is inconsistent with what we expect. We expect to see certain emotional responses. We expect to see certain physical expressions as a natural part of humanity in motion, as a natural part of human intimacy. The way he responded is not natural. Emotionless response is not natural. Responding without our bodies is unnatural. The human condition naturally interfaces. Our humanity naturally interfaces with others through through our intellect, through verbal language, through body language, through heart language. And so, that's not weird. And so cultivating intimacy with God, worshiping God, is no different. We also interface with God with our minds and with heart language and with body language. So listen, church, worship is holistic. The kind of worship that God requires of us necessarily involves the whole of our being, our minds, our words, our emotions, and our bodies. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your mind and all of your soul and all of your strength. Taste and see that the Lord is good, and there's joy when we engage in his presence. And so the Bible commands us to interface with God, not only with our minds, but with our bodies and our emotions as well. Now listen to this. Why? Because is it more spiritual to engage with God with our bodies and our emotions? No. But it is more human. It is more human. So here's what we're going to do. Let's stand. So we are in the habit of feeling like, the sermon's done, service is done. But remember, we turned everything upside down, so we're not done. It is time to worship. And so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to make a choice. I will worship, whether I feel like it or not. I will reach out in this moment to grab a hold of the Lord, to taste him, and to see that he's good, okay? And then the second thing I want to encourage you to do, and I don't want you to feel coerced or manipulated, but for some of you, I want you to take a risky step this morning, and engage your body in worship, okay? And so, if you're comfortable doing so, just kind of hold out your hands like this a little bit. So we're not worshiping, so this isn't weird. We're just holding up our hands like, can I have another piece of pizza? Right? So this isn't weird, right? This is just a human posture that says, yeah, I'm open. I'm ready to receive. I need something, right? Nothing weird about this. And so we're going to now take this human posture into the context of relationship with God. And as we sing these songs and we reach out to taste and see that the Lord is good, we're just going to also be saying with our bodies and our emotions, if that comes as well, God, I'm open. I want to receive. I want to step into you. I want you to step into me. I'm inviting you into this place of intimacy with me because I'm open. You see what the posture says? That's just natural human language. There's nothing weird about that. And so I just encourage you to, as we continue to worship, to allow your bodies to say what you want to say to the Lord. Okay?